Genesis is such a great book of history and is the beginning of all of the Earth's problems. Now that the author of this list of inconsistencies has given us all of the problems he has with Genesis 1, it is now time to move on to Genesis 2. And to my surprise, he only has one problem with this chapter, and it is about Adam and the naming of all of the animals. So let's take a look at that. God makes the animals and parades them before Adam to see if any would strike his fancy, but none seem to have what it takes to please him, although he was tempted to go for the sheep. After making the animals, God has Adam name them all. The naming of several million species must have kept Adam busy for a while. Genesis 2 verse 18 to 20. If you're a young Earth creationist, you already know what the problem with this reasoning is. But for those of you who think that it's a perfectly good argument, let's look at the passage and some counter arguments to this. And the Lord God said, "It is not good that the man should be alone. I will make him and help meet for him. And out of the ground the Lord God formed every beast of the field and every fowl of the air, and brought them unto Adam to see what he would call them. And whatsoever Adam called every living creature, that was the name thereof. And Adam gave names to all cattle, and to the fowl of the air, and to every beast of the field. But for Adam there was not found an help meet for him." Okay, so let me right off the bat give you my first counter argument to this. If you have ever read the Bible, you will know that Adam lived to be 900 years old. On top of that, he could have probably lived in Eden for up to 100 years. The reason I say this is because we know that Seth was born when Adam was 130. Seth was also born after Cain killed Abel, and so they had to be around 20 or 30 years old at least. Subtracting that from 130, we get that Adam could have lived in the garden for 100 years before he sinned against God. From what we read in the Bible, we just don't know exactly how long Adam did live in the garden, but we have that at most it is 100 years. So from this, I think Adam had more than enough time to name millions of species of animals. However, I do not think that this is a necessary interpretation we need to do, because I don't think there existed millions of species of animals in Adam's time. Let me explain what I mean. I am going to argue that Adam did not need to name millions of species of animals, just like Noah did not need to take millions of species of animals onto the ark, as we will see in Genesis 7, 8 and 9. The reason I say this is because of evolution. I know that a lot of red flags and alarms are now going off in almost all young Earth creationists' minds. But before you rage quit this video, please hear me out. You see, I do believe that evolution is true. However, I just don't believe that one type of animal can change into another type of animal. For example, I don't think horses can turn into whales. But I do, for example, believe that snakes can evolve to have different sizes and venom strength. There is a lot I can say on this topic, and I have created a video dedicated to this topic where I go into much more detail on why I believe this. So do feel free to go watch that video, the link is in the description. But for now, you know everything we need to know to debunk this inconsistency. So for this moment, let's consider beetles. According to Google, there is around 350,000 beetle species. From my point of view, all of these species of beetle could have come about from 1, 2, or maybe 10 species of beetle 6,000 years ago. If you think that this claim is unjustifiable, just remember that science tells you that all animals that live on Earth today come from one species or one creature billions of years ago. So I think arguing that all of the beetle species on Earth today came from one single species of beetle 6,000 years ago is much more reasonable. So just for the beetle case, this would get rid of 349,999 species, because all Adam had to do was name one species of beetle. The next argument I want to make is, let's assume that there were millions of species of animals in Adam's time. From this, it still doesn't follow that Adam had to name all of these species and give them individual names. Think about it like this. Let's take the beetles as our example again. All 350,000 of these species look very similar. They might have different colors or shapes, but they all look like a beetle. So, if all of these species did exist in Adam's time, he could have simply said that all of the animals that look similar to this one will now be called beetle. And just from that, Adam would have gotten rid of 349,999 names that he had to think of. If you think that this is unjustified again, just think about the English language. We do exactly the same thing. We put all 350,000 of these species on Earth into one category and call that category beetles. If we did not do that, then the concept of a species would not exist, because then each individual species would be a different kind of animal. So I hope that you can now see how unreasonable the claim is that the author made. Then lastly, not as an argument, I just want to complain about the little comment made by the author in this inconsistency. Although this doesn't show anything in terms of the inconsistency, it does show the state of mind the author was in while he wrote these inconsistencies. It is pretty clear that he was just trying to mock the Bible and make it out to be silly. And this little part between the brackets just made me trust the list and the author much less. Which, by the way, says a lot. Okay. With all of that out of the way, let's look at the argument once more and see how we can improve it. Premise 1. God brought all the animals to Adam to name them and get himself a helper. Premise 2. None of them seems to have what it takes to please him. Premise 3. There are millions of species of animals on Earth. Conclusion. It would have taken a really long time for Adam to name all of these animals. I'm sure by now you can see how we can improve on this argument. Premise 1 is true and premise 2 is also true. But premise 2 is unnecessary to the argument, so I will replace it with another premise. As we said, premise 3 is also true, but isn't necessarily true for the time Adam lived in. So I will improve on this argument by adding another premise to this list. So here is the improved argument. Premise 1. God brought all the animals to Adam to receive a name. Premise 2. There are millions of species of animals on Earth. Premise 3. The millions of species of animals were the result of speciation and evolution with natural selection. Premise 4. Adam could have lived in the garden for 100 years. Conclusion. Even though there are millions of species of animal on the Earth, there weren't millions of animal species in Adam's time, and even if there were, Adam had 100 years to name them all, which is more than enough time. So there you have it, my brothers and sisters, another consistent inconsistency. If you would like to see how God's clever talking serpent takes the stage in the next inconsistency, then watch the video on screen right now. Thank you all for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed and I shall see you in the next one. Cheers!